You're listening to the third season of the Ministry Mind Leadership Podcast with me, your host, Kim Cooper. Each episode, we will speak with leaders from across Canada with the purpose of bringing connection, engagement, and encouragement. We hope these episodes will challenge and equip you along your ministry journey. Welcome to Ministry Mind Podcast. Today, I am honored to have some friends joining me. We are going to have a great conversation about women in ministry. And so today I have my friend Vanessa Mehrer here from the Assiniboia Apostolic Church, and she is lead pastor with her husband. As well, I have Sandy Faulkner Stevens from the Lighthouse in Haliburton, Ontario. And so I'm just delighted to have you ladies join me to have this conversation around women in ministry. And I'm excited to hear your insights and your wisdom. So thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
So first of all, let's hear a little bit about the two of you. Why don't you, Sandy, start and tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, kind of about your family, and yeah, just a little bit about you. Give us a little insight.
Sure. Well, I'm a gal who grew up in London, Ontario, actually in Southern Ontario. And I moved to the Haliburton region in my early 20s for employment. Met my husband at work, and we were met and married in about a year. We have three grown sons, now pushing 29 up to 30, which is wild to think that that's where we're at. And I'm a grandma to one little redheaded boy and probably step grandma to two more little ones here shortly. So I'm excited to be pouring into their lives right now too and enjoying time with them.
Awesome. Okay, Vanessa, you're up.
All right. I am a lead pastor at the Assiniboia Apostolic Church alongside my husband. I have three beautiful kids, all under the age of 12. And I am originally from Regina, so I am a city girl through and through. And yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Awesome. So just to get people kind of, well, and even for myself, I want to hear, what are some of your guys' hobbies? What do you like to spend your time, your free time doing?
Oh my goodness. When I do have time to waste, I was thinking about this. I was like, oh my goodness, I don't know if I have a hobby. I need to get one. Right now my hobbies are keeping children alive. So, but I have a dog. I love my dog. This is the first dog I've ever owned. So I call her Therapy with Fur On. And I love being outside, which is really hard in Saskatchewan sometimes. So I would say my hobbies are being in the mountains. So I love the mountains. I love everything about them. So my hobby is expensive because I have to drive there. So
but you also like soccer.
oh yes, I love soccer. Grew up playing soccer, so now I get the privilege of coaching soccer to the under sevens. So I spend my time with my sons coaching soccer. What else? I love to read. I'm a prolific reader, and I love coffee. So I would say coffee and books are my best friends.
Yeah.
That sounds terrible, but I'm an introvert, so I love being by myself with my dog, a good book, and a cup of coffee.
Who doesn't? Sandy, how about you?
Well, I'm an outdoorsy girl too, and where we live in Haliburton is like cottage country. So to be out walking or on the lake, I love to swim. I've always been a swimmer, so I'm really blessed to actually live in this community. Moving from Southern Ontario to Northern or Central Ontario, I should say, has really been an awesome thing. We've been here for over 35 years now, so it's a pretty blessed place to be. Right now, my husband and I have a huge, and since I think I looked up the date, 2011, we've had a passion for sailing. And I don't know if you can see back there, and maybe I shouldn't point that out right now, but there's a boat behind me, a picture there, and it's of our sailboat, Queen Esther, that we love so much. And it's a 35-foot liveaboard that we've been able to jump on together. And it has been, can I tell you, the best marriage therapy that you can get. And you cannot get around not working together and learning teamwork if you haven't, when you're on a sailboat, because you all have to have your roles and you all have to have your jobs. So anyways, we love sailing. We love to be out on the water. And so that's a blessing for us, and time to get away, from everything and everyone. Yeah.
That's really cool. I'm intrigued. I have no concept of sailing, but it sounds interesting. It also sounds like it could be dangerous, like when my husband and I are trying to park the RV.
Yeah, it can be dangerous. We had a kind of a crazy experience on the Trent Severn Waterway when we were moving the boat from Lake Simcoe down to Lake Ontario for bigger water. It was high water, spring season, and we came into a lock and lost our transmission. So we could not stop in the rushing water before hitting a gate. And so I have a good set of lungs. I did a whole lot of screaming and got the attention of the people on shore and the dock master. And we managed to stop the thing before we crashed, and we got a little scratch on the side. But yeah, that was probably the most excitement I've had sailing, and I don't really want to repeat that again, but it was a learning experience for sure.
Oh my goodness. Oh my. Okay, let's switch gears. I'm picturing many things right now.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. So you ladies are in ministry and you're in lead roles, and I want to know, let's talk about how you first felt the call to ministry. I want to hear a little bit about that. I think one of the best things that we can do to get to know one another, but also to encourage the next generation of leaders is through story and through our testimony, right? And so tell me a little bit, Sandy, about when you first felt a call to ministry.
Wow. I came to know Jesus in my early 20s after I moved to the Haliburton area. And it wasn't too long after he kind of wooed my heart. I already loved God, but I didn't know Jesus, if that makes sense. And I won't give all the details of that right now, but it was pretty early on that I felt the call to ministry. I just have a love for people and wanting to see them flourish and thrive. And so when I met the Lord and was introduced to his heart for people and how much greater it is and amazing it is, it didn't take me long to just want to align with that and feel that call for ministry. And so I sort of started out in children's ministry, and doing Sunday school and stuff like that. And then I think there was an Anglican priest, actually. We were attending an Anglican church when we got married, and he recognized some gifts in me, and he just made a way for me to start. And it was in the Sunday school, even though I was really young in my faith, and he believed in me. And then a series of opportunities came along: Bible study, women's ministry. You just start walking through those doors. And then I hit youth ministry and camping ministry, and there was just opportunities that God put in my path. And it wasn't long before I just felt, I think I was doing a eulogy for my mother-in-law's funeral. I've been asked to speak at it. And someone came up to me afterwards and just said, "Sandy, I think you should be a pastor." And I was like, what? I felt called to ministry, but that role, I wasn't sure if I even liked women in ministry at that point. Right. Sometimes it can be, they were a bit bristling and a bit hard. And I wasn't sure how I felt about that at first, but I had other pastors that came along and opened doors for me and gave me opportunity then to start preaching and speaking in a church and exercising those other gifts that I have. On my report card in high school, it was always the gift of gab that I, walked in the most. And so if I got a platform, even better, or an audience. So, but no, they seriously gave me opportunity just to share my love of Jesus from the platform. And so that was the beginning of feeling that that might be something that I really should be paying attention to. And so I was grateful for, the 3 or 4 men that came alongside me and made opportunity and room for me to be able to then stretch those little wings and see where they would take me. So yeah, so that's kind
I
of,
love that.
it was a progressive journey. It really was. Yeah.
Yes. But I love that there was a small group of people that saw something in you. They called it out and gave you opportunity. And really what it took was you saying yes over and over again for you to kind of walk that out to become aware of the actual call on your life. That's really cool. And I think often a lot of our experiences, right? We're often not aware. Not only are we unaware sometimes of our weaknesses, but sometimes we're blind to our strengths too. If it doesn't kind of fit what we think of ourselves, that persona that we put off. Very, very cool. Vanessa, tell us a little bit about your call to ministry and when you first kind of felt that.
I don't know if I ever had one specific moment that I had, that epiphany that yes, you're going to be a pastor. I think it was a series of very small steps. I've always had a desire to serve God and to serve him in whatever capacity I was in. And so I think it's very similar to yours, where it was one decision after another and people coming alongside of me and saying, hey, I see in you this ability. Would you consider here? I think I've always been in leadership in some form or another, or been part of teams starting something or leading something. So I don't know if it was ever one moment, but it was a series of yeses and a series of people saying, I see these giftings in you. Would you consider doing this?
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask a slightly different question. I had planned to then ask you, to tell us kind of where you began and how you got to where you are now. But you both just said it was a progression of yeses. So I'm gonna throw you a curveball right now, because I know that in that saying yes and kind of learning who we are and where our strengths are, where our weaknesses are, and filling voids and, just being available, often that helps us to become more aware of how we can be used, and how we can serve the mission of the gospel. But tell me a little bit about the progression to both of you actually having lead roles. Was there a moment where you felt, okay, this is what the Lord wants me to do? Tell me a little bit about that, because there's got to be a point at which you go, I think I'm actually called to lead this church. And that's not always the norm. So how did that work out in your lives? Who wants to go first?
I can go.
Okay.
I think I pastored very early in my 20s. In the 80s and 90s, I think if you had a call to ministry, if you felt like you just wanted to serve God in any capacity, you were going to be either a pastor or you're going to be in full-time ministry,
or missions.
Or missions, right? I think that those were your boxes that you could serve God in. And so that was the role that they said, hey, we see this leadership gifting in you. We see that you have influence. We're going to stick you in this role in my early 20s. But I didn't have enough character I had not developed the character to withstand my calling or to withstand that office and in those my early 20s. And so I crashed and burned.
Ooh.
And I had said, okay, God, never again. I will never pastor. But you know what happens when you make vows? You can't do that. That's not a good thing to do. And so I met and married my husband. I said, okay, Lord, I'm going to serve you. I'm not not in that role. And so I think it was a progression of me developing character, understanding what healthy leadership looks like, understanding what it means to pastor the hearts of your people and the people that are around you. And so I actually was a hairstylist. And I just thought, I'm just going to love the people around me. I'm going to love my neighbors. I'm going to, in essence, I was a pastor in my salon, not even understanding the concept. And so I think it was the Lord really working in me a deep love for what it means to pastor hearts, to shepherd people. And my husband, if you ask him, he would have said, I never wanted to be a pastor. And yet when you look at him, he is a pastor. And so my husband and I've always worked together. We've always done things side by side. And so we were so happy to be leading in our church. We just thought this is where we're going to die with our boots on. Like, we'll just serve our church. You want us to lead a Bible study? It's a yes. Like, we will just help you pastor your people. And so one of our pastors came to us and said, hey, would you ever want to be in a pastoral role? And I, in my large thinking, I was like, oh, we can lead a Bible study. And so they came to us and said, actually, no, would you two consider being senior pastors? And the Lord had just been doing a huge work in our heart. And I really struggled with this. And the Lord confronted me and he said, what does it profit a woman if she gains the whole world and yet loses her soul? And I said, okay, Lord, my answer is yes. My answer is yes. And so that was how we got to be senior leaders. And David and I said we wanted to go together. We wanted to lead together. And my husband is my biggest supporter in my giftings and in my role. And so he said, well, this won't be a 2-for-1. So if we come, we're coming together. And our church is amazing. They said, yes, we'll hire you together. And I would say that is how we came to be senior leaders together.
Awesome. Well, Sandy, tell us your story.
Well, mine is a little different, but I in those progression of yeses, God was, and I echo Vanessa, working character out in me. And so there is a training that and a preparation that has to happen. And when we short circuit it, like Vanessa said, we cannot be able to rise to that calling in our character. Even though our gifting might be there, our character has to align to hold that gifting properly. And so I got a little frustrated because I'm a grandma now and became the lead pastor of our church at 56, and so 57. So it's I knew I was headed that direction, but what the Lord had to teach me was I didn't need to self-promote.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That it's huge, right, Vanessa? We don't need to self-promote, and we need to allow the Lord to promote us step by step in his good time and in his good way, because he knows the assignment that he has for us. And we just need to continue saying yes, like we did, and then being open to that and learning the lessons along the way. And then I was actually tracking for 2 different things because I had a bit of a conflict going on, because I had a career opportunity in employment services that I got hired on, and I kept promoting and promoting and promoting at work. Yet I knew in my heart that I wanted to serve the Lord and that there was some kind of pastoral call on me. And so what I did was I tracked both careers at the same time, finally towards the past 7 or 8 years. And what happened was just at COVID, and I think Kim, you've heard a bit of my story, was that my career job that I was promoting in suddenly disappeared with COVID. And I was tracking for this employment job, full-time employment job with benefits, and I was preparing for ordination at the same time. So I started going to peak. I was mentoring with my senior pastor, volunteering, as an assistant pastor with him at the same time as working full time. And I didn't know, I was trying to leave it up to the Lord, right? Not self-promote, but walking through the doors that were open to me and letting him direct the traffic, if that makes any sense. And when COVID hit, I lost my job. I graduated from the education piece that I was doing for that at the same time that I lost my job in that career field. And I was prepared for ordination exactly the same spring, that March when COVID hit. So I lost my job in May of 2020. And I'm like, Lord, I had to put on my big girl panties and just get over this and let you lead. I can't, I'm not going to sit in this place. Yeah. And so I bared down sort of thing and got into our bed and breakfast, which we have at our home too on the side. And so I went into tourism season, started booking guests. And then all of a sudden, the end of July, a week cleared out, guests canceled. And our senior pastor died suddenly. Yeah.
Oh. Yeah.
Yeah. And in a day, I was the interim pastor in a day.
Yeah.
And it was an abrupt, a long time coming suddenly.
I love that statement.
A long time coming suddenly.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. That is such a great way to put it. Where David and I have ended up is a long time coming and then suddenly.
That is so cool. And I loved, Sandy, like how that was tracking and you could have gone either way. And then the Lord was like, here it is.
Yeah. There's a biblical thing that I've come across just recently. I was studying the life of Elijah, and it was talking about him going to Mount Carmel and him being very specific about how he arranged the sacrifice. He listened to God and he prepared.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He prepared for the timing, God's timing. And there were two lessons I picked out of that was that we need to be worried about preparing the sacrifice, that character, exercising that growth, leaning into him, growing our intimacy with Jesus.
Yes.
And then we leave the fire or the promotion up to God. The fire falls in his time and in his way and in his assignment. And so all we need to be concerned about is preparing the sacrifice, aligning our character, Christ-likeness, humility. I always go through these 4: prayer and unity. And that's our focus and our track. And then God is the one who makes the way, who brings the fire and brings the opportunity. So yeah.
Sandy, that preaches.
It does. And I would add to Sandy's, for those young women leaders that are listening to this, and even just any woman leader that's listening to this, there's this temptation in Isaiah 30. It says, you obstinate people, you look to Pharaoh, you look to Pharaoh's army, you look to greener pastures. And yet I didn't to orchestrate all your ways, yet I didn't tell you to do that. That's not what I told you. It's in repentance and rest is your salvation, and quietness and trust is your strength. And I think that speaks to the hiddenness of being hidden in God before there's a revealing. And so sometimes we can get so antsy and stuck, like, well, I see that table. I really want to sit at that table. Or chairs just aren't being pulled out for you to be able to sit at that table. And I think that there's seasons where you really wrestle with that, where you're like, am I going to live in obscurity all the days of my life?
Oh, girl, there's my word, obscurity. I wrestled with that so much.
And so, like, to speak to those women that are wrestling with obscurity, to speak to those women that are wrestling with, will my voice count? Will I be seen? Yes. Will I be known? I think that is such a tagline to hold on to, is a long time coming and then suddenly.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks to character development. I think that speaks to Lisa Turkhurst says that the tweaking of you in private is the saving of you in public.
Amen.
I don't think we do that well. I don't think that we sit with our hiddenness well in order for the Holy Spirit to cultivate personal transformation so that we have the character to withstand the calling. And so I would encourage anybody that's listening to this right now that is really wrestling with that obscurity to maybe flip the paradigm shift of, this is a hidden moment. I'm hidden with Christ. And if I can fully rest in him and trust him, it will not only be the saving of me, it will give me the strength to walk it out so that I can hear him say behind me, say, this is the way to go. Now walk in it.
Mm.
So
Amen.
I think there's something to be said for faithfulness. I think there's something to be said for allowing us to be tweaked in the private of our lives so that the public matches the private.
Yeah.
Because when there's a disconnect between the private and the public, that's where you crash and burn. And we need really solid leaders whose private and public lives match.
Yeah.
So I would say you hold on to that a long time coming, and then suddenly, and it's the suddenlies that really catch us off guard.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because when this suddenly happens and you're like, oh, I'm not ready. Oh my gosh. And it kind of catches you and you're like, no, Lord's saying you are ready and here you go. And like you said, walk in the way.
I don't think you're
and then
ever
you're going through a whole nother process of just, resting in him and taking those steps forward. So yeah.
I don't think you're ever ready for the suddenlies.
No.
But I do think that if we can be deep wells, then when the suddenlies happen, you have depth to draw on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, like I know for myself, I felt that hiddenness, especially when my kids were really young. And I was in that season of maternity leaves and being so stuck to my house because of nap time or like, and I remember probably about 5 years ago speaking to one of my mentors, Dawn Grayburn, and I just said, I feel like my head is coming to the surface. I feel like there's a shift coming. I feel like this has been that season of learning how to discern the divine presence in my life, in the hidden, in my home, in my everyday tasks. And something's about to happen. Something's about to shift. And that those years and years of me wrestling with giftings that I had to work out with the Lord and character flaws that I had to work out and insecurities that I had to work out. And then I'm just so grateful for, like you said, a couple of those people making space or even challenging you. Like I still needed to take steps towards walking that out and like saying those yeses and challenging myself and being available. And so then it was all of a sudden moment where I had a couple prophetic words over my life that I expected to take years and years. I expected this one prophetic word, I expected to have to put it on the shelf and wait for 10, 15, maybe 20 years to see it come to pass. And then it was in 1 year that happened. And I was like, what? But I wouldn't have been ready had I not had those years in the hidden. I love that, you guys. That is such gold right there.
I think one of the other questions, or to answer this question of how did you get where you are?
Yeah.
I would say tenaciously going after a core group of relationships that I surround myself with.
Yeah.
To give me feedback, to encourage me, to say, hey, Vanessa, I don't know if you realize this, but I see this in you. So both good and, a healthy
hard.
The the good and the weighty. What is it? What did you say the other day? What's a win and what's weighty, right?
Yep.
And so I would say that I could not have gotten here without those women, and I could not stay here without that core group of relationships because they help bear the weight of ministry and leadership. So whether you are leading in a ministry role or in the marketplace or in a not-for-profit, wherever you're leading is weighty and it's messy. And just because you go to the next level doesn't mean that you went away, because wherever you are, there you are. Right. And so it's really personal transformation. And so I think there's this wrestling of, if I can just get to that platform, if I can just get to that next level.
Yeah.
It does, I think sometimes we think it'll fix some of the things in our lives, but it doesn't. It magnifies them.
Yeah.
And so for these amazing young women that are coming up behind us, maybe they're smarter than I was, right? Maybe they're listening going, yeah, I got that. But the platform doesn't fix anything. It just magnifies it and highlights it. And so
for sure. And I think that like I want to talk about what are some of the best things about being a woman in leadership. What are some of the hardest things about being a woman in leadership? And I know that for myself, I've felt it and I've heard it a lot, the loneliness and the lack of friendship can be a really hard thing. But the balance of that is like, as women, we are so relational. Like, and I think that that's a positive. I know that that's a positive. That's what makes us good pastors, because we care for people. We're nurturing. We lean into relationship, but also can be the hard thing, the lonely thing. What do you guys, what's the greatest thing about being a female in leadership? What's the hardest thing? How do you balance those? How do you reconcile those? Sandy, what do you think?
I'm a little bit, I mean, I agree with what you're saying, Vanessa, and Kim. I think that we need those relationships big time. And our strength, I think, like you said, as women, is that we lean into those relationships and we love into those relationships and we care into those relationships. I think too, another part of being and that just brings me so much joy. And so that's one of the, bonuses of being a woman in ministry. One of the things I love about it. The other part, I think, is that, and my husband was concerned at first when the opportunity came up for me to be, because he's not leading with me, I'm leading as a senior pastor. He is a behind the scenes kind of guy. He's the Martha at the coffee, booth. He's making the coffee and talking to people and wants to be a little bit quieter in the background. But he was concerned for my heart, because church can be difficult and relationships can be hard, and we have to make some challenging choices, and we have to release some people sometimes, and sometimes we need to resolve conflict, and sometimes we have to live with conflict, and our hearts, my heart, I won't speak for everybody, my heart's pretty tender, and I really had to work at not taking things personally, and being gracious and extending forgiveness and love, even when it may not have been reciprocated. But God is so faithful to pour that into our hearts as we ask Him to do that, and to give us more grace. And so I think the hardest part about being a woman in ministry is just, I don't want to say we don't want to protect our hearts, because we want them to be vulnerable, but at the same time, we need to have people who care about us enough to speak into those situations to help us along. Those relationships are valuable. So when something hurts, to have someone that can pray for us and to be able to release that quickly and not
Mhm.
hold on to those things, I guess, would
Mhm.
be
Mhm.
probably that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that piece for me.
Because there is a cost to leadership. There really is a cost. And sometimes that's the weight of it that we talk about, the cost of leading through the hard times. And sometimes that's broken relationship. Sometimes that's, like you said, being okay with having to live through conflict. And sometimes it lasts a lot longer. And sometimes you have to be okay with people just not liking you. That's a hard one. That's a hard one. We're not going to be everybody's cup of tea, right? And it's hard. Vanessa, how about you? What do you think about that? What's your line of thought when you're looking at the positives and the negatives of being a female in leadership, and um how do you balance those?
I think one of the best things about being in my position is the ability to pull out chairs for other people.
Yeah.
I love being a promoter of others. And so one of the best things about where I lead and in the spheres of influence that I lead is being able to connect others to opportunity.
Yeah.
And make room and space at the table for a next generation coming up behind me. And I love that. So that is a really great thing about where in the context that I lead, because I also sit on the regional lead team and I get to help with leadership training. And so that is, I love that. I think one of the hardest things about being a woman in ministry and in leadership is the loneliness. I think one of the questions I had was, how do you have friends that you pastor, and how do you pastor your friends? And I don't even have an answer for that. I think it's being intentional with developing a core group of support and relationships around me has definitely helped. But I would say that that's intentional. It doesn't just happen.
Well, and as well, it's interesting for you as Vanessa, because like you lead alongside your husband, but like your giftings are very different than his and are more aggressive than his, or like more vocal, like, and so balancing that. And I've loved watching you guys advocate for one another, cheer on one another, but also temper one another. And I've actually watched you guys do that. That's unique too. I think for myself, one thing that like I have found difficult, and I read, I don't know if either of you guys have read Danielle Strickland's book called Better Together. And she talks about the weight that women leaders carry, whatever realm they're in. And it's just a reality of being a female, and whether it is that you are married or not married, have children or don't have children, but culturally, the woman carries a heavy weight. And it's as if we're walking into a leadership scenario, and say a woman and a man are walking into this leadership scenario, and the woman always has a heavy backpack on. That weight of the cultural expectation on her. And just becoming aware of that for yourself, or for the males around you to be aware of. And it doesn't matter what realm of leadership that you're in, whether it's business or ministry or whatever. It's either a perceived weight that you're carrying with you, or it's a felt weight that you really do have. And the reality is, I have an amazing husband that can cook and clean and, take care of the kids. And I trust him with that. But at the end of the day, a lot of that still falls on me. And when I go home at the end of the day, because of who he is and just his personality, he can sit on the couch and turn it off and be okay with the house being messy. That's fine by him. He's like, whatever, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Where I'm organizing the schedule and I'm worrying about the laundry and I'm doing all the things. So I don't know, like, I'm sure that there's other women in ministry that feel that same need or that weight that they carry along with them, that men either just choose not to carry or don't have to carry. But I would say that that's one thing that I struggle with.
Well, I think an observation is that there was this metaphor that you wear all these different hats, right? And so you go into your work and you put on your work hat. You come home, you put on your mom hat. You go, and you put on your wife hat. And I think that actually, that metaphor needs to start changing, that you are all those things all the time. There's just certain ones that rise to the top depending on your circumstance or where you are. And I think that understanding that actually helped, that I don't have all these split personalities. I am all these things all the time. So whether I'm at my office, I'm still a mom and a wife. If I'm at home, I'm still a pastor. I'm still a leader. But I am a mom and a wife. And I love that it's the analogy of juggling all these balls all the time. You just have to know which one are your glass balls.
Yeah.
You have to know which ones that if you drop that one and that breaks, you may not be able to put that one back together.
Right.
But if you drop that ball, it's a plastic ball, it'll bounce. It may not be great that you dropped it, but that'll bounce. And I think the recognizing which are your glass balls and which are your rubber balls will help in your rhythm of your day-to-day life and schedule. And I don't think that balance is a great word. I don't think you'll ever have balance. In the hard, weighty world of leadership and pastoral ministry, understanding rhythms and understanding all of that has helped in the difficult seasons.
I'm going to use that when I use a day planner prolifically, like I live by it. And so every week I look at my to-do list and do my priorities, but I'm going to use that from now on. I'm going to be like, well, that'll bounce.
That's right.
I'm using that one. That'll bounce.
The other thing I just want to add to that too is that we have to be okay with wanting to, being okay with asking for help.
Yes.
Like it's okay to ask someone to take on a task. Sometimes I know I'm guilty of this, is that I think I need to do it because I want it done to a certain standard sometimes. And
Yes.
so, right, like I'm the only one that can do it the right way, but I need to let go of some of that.
Yes.
And allow someone else to take the lead on that particular thing, and to ask someone else actually to do it for me.
Yeah.
And so that's really important. I'm a day planner too. I got my calendar, but sometimes I got to look at it and I got to go, okay, I need space just for me. We talk about those holy rhythms, right?
Yeah.
Because we need to stay healthy and full. And I need help in this area. Who cares who empties the dishwasher? Who cares who puts in the load of laundry? Maybe my kids need to go out and play. I need to call the gal down the street to come over for an afternoon. You know what I mean? So, and I've done all of those things before. And then called time out, and said to my hubby, I'm going away for the weekend by myself to a hotel room that has a pool, and taking my Bible and going for long walks. And so, yeah, we have to, like you said, there's different balls that we can take, and we can ask for help with those balls.
Absolutely. And we need to be okay with how they do it. I love that, because you're right. And that's where I had to go, okay, he's not going to do it the same way I would. That's okay.
Oh, if this is applicable to everyone, but I think there's this idea, or I wonder if there is this thinking that I have to do everything well.
Yeah.
In order to, because when I look across the board, I'm so encouraged that there are more male and female versus voices coming together. Like that's really important. But I wonder if in the back of our brains as a female leader, there's this lie that you have to do everything well. Don't drop any balls. You got to this table. Now you have to prove that you can still stay here. So don't let anything go. And I think that's a lie. I love Katie Cole's analogy of a cake stand. You move up, but your plates get smaller the more you move up. So the more you have to outsource.
Yeah.
And I think we have to be good at outsourcing. And I think we have to be really good at delegating and then not micromanaging.
Absolutely.
So,
the book that Vanessa is referencing there is Developing Female Leaders by Katie Cole. We'll link that book. It's a great book, and a wonderful resource for women and men working with female leaders. It's wonderful. So, okay, we've talked about some positives, some negatives, some things that are great, some things that are really hard being a female leader. So I want to ask you, Sandy, what's the biggest lesson you learned?
Just keep boldly saying yes to the Lord.
Yeah.
Just keep boldly saying yes. And moving into those opportunities that he brings your way, learning the character lessons along the way, letting him grow you into Christ-likeness, letting him shape your heart, letting him, transform your mind, grow those leadership skills, because it's far better, as Vanessa said, to develop in the hiddenness of the private than to have your fallenness be on display on the platform. And so, and to be perfectly frank, the younger generations are tired of seeing that happen. And we need to have authenticity, and we need to have integrity, and it's really important to people's trust and their ability to then trust God. And so we have to be effective leaders that way.
If you could change one thing about being in ministry, if there's one thing that from what you've learned so far, what would that be?
I think there's two things.
Okay.
One, as a female leader, learning how to utilize your voice in a humble way. I think if we approach, very much what Sandy was saying, like if we approach it and we are prickly or we're pushy or all of those things, I equate it to having your volume turned up full blast. People will if the volume's too loud, all they want to do is cover their ears. They won't be able to hear you. Yeah. If your voice is too low, people will be straining to going, oh, I can't hear it. So they'll tune out. And so I think it's really knowing how to turn your volume up and turn it down in certain situations. I think the thing that I would, if there's one thing I could see being changed, is seeing a paradigm shift surrounding the conversation on male and female roles versus changing it to a gifting and a character role. Okay. So what I mean by that is we have these conversations about how do we get more women on our boards, or how do we get more women involved, or maybe there isn't that conversation of, we don't want women on our boards, or, I see how can we get more men involved here? And so it becomes this conversation around gender. Well, we just need more male voices, or we need more female voices here. And what I'd like to maybe, and what I'd like to suggest, or maybe what I'd like to see changing, is how do we get these character qualities? How do we promote these giftings? Because I think that we need male and female voices. I think we really are better together. Yeah. But like in the past, our sex has done a disservice to leadership where we have emasculated a male voice.
Yeah.
And in certain circumstances, the male voice has silenced the female voices. So I wonder if we could learn to have conversations where we're elevating the value of both sides.
Mm-hmm.
It's needed. We need not an equal number of male and female on the board. We need the characters, like that character quality, and we need the giftings to match the position.
Yes,
So
I like that, because we have that cliche saying we're better together. And I mentioned Danielle Strickland's book, but the reality is that it's not about a ratio at a table. It's not about being the token female, although oftentimes there's validity in that, and there's always got to be someone has to go first, right? And so, but to not have it be about the ratio, but about the gift and calling and the gift mix, and looking at the diversity around your board table, expressing and being able to give voice to the different people that make the body of Christ. And I love what you said about that. In our current circumstance, in the realms that we find ourselves, the three of us, there aren't as many female ministers at that high level of leadership, right? And so we need to make space for them, but we also need to honor those that make space for us. Sandy, anything to add?
I think that we have to be okay with, as we step out as women and as we lead forward, and the younger women that are coming up behind us, we have to be okay too with being that token female that might be sitting at the table. And in my situation here, where I live, I'm one of the few or only females at the ministerial level of our community. And so how we carry ourselves into this really matters.
Yeah.
We can come at it with a entitlement kind of mentality, with an abrasive kind of, this is my right, I should be in this place. But I have found that humility and just grace is the best tactic.
Yeah.
We earn the respect of people, right? We just can't walk into a situation and expect it should just be there automatically. Doesn't matter what relationship we're in. We need to earn the respect of other people. We need to, they need to know that we genuinely care, that we're participating in good faith, that we're a part of that team, and do that with humility and with grace. And courage, I'm not saying courage, but not getting bitter and not being in that place of feeling like I've been ripped off, or I'm not considered, first, or, like you said, wanting someone else to pull the chair out for you. That may not be the case. Sometimes you've got to sit in that chair and you need to own it, but own it with a willingness and a grace that speaks louder than any of the words probably that you could even give. I know that when I sat at the table for a few months with the gentleman I was with, one gentleman who would have been in a congregation and was a pastor in a denomination that would not support female pastors, came to me and said, I am impressed with your wisdom and your humility and the grace that you lead your congregation with, and how you handle yourself in ministry. Wow. Thank you. And that just blessed me, because it creates trust and relationship, and the ability then to exchange ideas and to have things taken seriously, and to be a contributing member at the table. So how we carry ourselves is really, really important.
I think that there's this idea that we have to get everyone to agree with us, that we're okay. Like, yes, we can be leaders, right? But the reality is that not everyone is going to have a theological basis that says, yes, you can be in that position. And I think that it has to come down to saying, well, it's not my job to change your mind.
Yeah.
It's not my job to change your theology. It's my responsibility to walk worthy of my calling, which means that I have to learn to walk in humility. I have to learn to swallow that lump in the back of my throat when I disagree, and also to disagree with honor.
Yeah.
disagree respectfully, and to treat others with that respect and dignity.
Excellent.
Yeah.
We're going to wrap up. I want to end on, if you have any resources or any last words that you want to share, why don't we just take a minute to do that? Let's go first with you, Sandy.
You already mentioned Katie Cole's book, Developing Female Leaders. That's a great resource as well. I recently did a study by Christy McClelland, and it's called Jesus and Women. And I just felt it was a fantastic Bible study. I did it with an online group of women, and just how he so graciously was always restoring and pulling women back into position in Christ, and how he was doing that in that first century world, going against the grain, and how Jesus honored women, and how he was lifting them back to the posture and the position that they should have. And so I just found that study really encouraging, and so did the women that were in my online group. So I just recommend that resource as well. Making sure that you are just with good female mentors, male and female mentors, and having people genuinely speak into your life, giving someone permission to do that.
Yes.
That's key, right? Like, we don't always want to hear what people have to say, but giving someone permission to be able to speak that or call that out is really important in our lives as well, and that development of those things. So yeah, press on, surround yourself with the right people, and look for those good resources too that are around you that you've already mentioned. Yeah, it's so important. So important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would finish this with it doesn't get easier, but you get stronger.
Yeah.
And the more you read, the better you lead. So I read a lot of books on the theology of women in leadership, so that the more skill that I can acquire, the better I can lead with empathy and grace.
Yeah.
And I think anything that can grow your empathy and grace within your leadership is well worth your time, because that's what building skill is about, is so that you can lead with more empathy.
Yeah.
And one of the books that I'm reading right now is by a South African pastor called How God Sees Women. And I picked it because it's not a Western view. It's he's from South Africa, so he's got an African view.
Yeah.
In women in leadership. And so I like to read things that are diverse and challenge my belief system, so that not so that I can lead with more force, but that I can lead with more empathy and humility. And then also it gives me a really great standing of my own theology, and it gives me a stronger foundation to stand on, so that I can lead with more grace, in gentleness. So
I love that. Not leading with more force.
Yeah.
I don't think that does us any services.
No, and I think understanding meekness is not being a doormat, but it's power under control.
Yes.
And so when you operate, or when you lead in meekness and humility, you have all this power, but it's under control. And so then you're able to have confidence and say, and lead with that courage. And I would say that it helps with the imposter syndrome that a lot of us struggle with. But I would say to the listeners that it does not get easier, but you do get stronger.
Amen.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, this has been a really valuable and wonderful conversation. I've loved getting to know you ladies better, and to hearing your stories and hearing your wisdom and insight as you guys continue to lead. So I want to thank you so much for being willing and available and giving me your yes. but also going ahead of those that are watching and waiting and preparing for their suddenly moment, right? Yeah. And so, yeah, just thank you so much for being vulnerable and taking this on. So thanks, ladies, so much for your time. And I look forward to getting together and seeing each one of you again and hearing more about the insights and the wisdom that God is bestowing you with.